Now we have a wonderful event planned with 4 amazing presentations. All of these projects are in the Design for Common Good exhibition, which is fantastic. We all enjoyed First Friday there last night. Highly recommend you see that show if you haven't had a chance. So the first presenter will be Scott Moore Medina, and he will be presenting Cultural Healing, a medicine mural at the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes George Hawkins Memorial Treatment Center. Scott?
Buenos dias. Ihanawaste, good morning. My name is Scott Moore Medina, and I'm an architect. I am the founder and president of Blue Star Integrative Studio. We are an Indigenous American professional services firm based out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are the southernmost outpost of the Bodway Professional Services Group, which is a family of architecture and engineering firms owned by Manoa Matson, which is the non-gaming economic development arm of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi out of Michigan. And I'm here today to share stories with you related to the medicine mural at the George Hawkins Memorial Treatment Center in Clinton, Oklahoma. And I have had a great honor working on this project side by side with Cheyenne Arapaho people. And I think what's very important for you to understand is there's a lot leading up to this project and this mural. And if we can't understand the context of history and people in place, then it's a lot harder to understand what this mural even means. So we're talking about Cheyenne Arapaho people. They're actually 2 distinct separate groups of people, but they're also allies and they have kinship. It's important to understand these things because if we don't understand people in place, we don't understand what we're even looking at or receiving for information. Cheyenne Arapaho, they did not always reside in Oklahoma. Their origins are actually closer to the Great Lakes regions of what we now call the United States. And with the arrival of the horse and other technology over the span of hundreds of years, they migrated out to the Great Plains and Rocky Mountains, finding greater fortunes hunting buffalo and engaging in trade commerce with French and other non-natives. And the Cheyenne Arapaho drew closer together over that time as allies, especially around the end of the 18th century, start of the 19th century. And they started to have closer and closer familial and ceremonial ties. So here's a map. This is the Upper Plains, Rocky Mountain region. We are over there in Colorado. If you see the orange blob there, that is the Cheyenne Arapaho Aboriginal territories about the time that the United States was starting to move westward. So that's about 60% of the state of Colorado was the homelands to Cheyenne Arapaho people. And I would say their fortune changed quite dramatically in the mid 1800s. So a lot of people probably remember from the 1800s, Trail of Tears or Civil War, American Civil War. People remember that maybe. There's a lot of other things that were happening during that time. In 1851, there was a treaty at Fort Laramie between a lot of the Upper Plains tribes in the United States of America. And that happened on September 17th, 1851. And Cheyenne Arapaho, they were there. They were part of that treaty. And ultimately, that was an acknowledgement by the United States that the land covered by that treaty, of which most of was Colorado at the time, or was to be Colorado, that it was Indian territory and the United States didn't lay any claim to it. And the Native Americans in return guaranteed safe passage of settlers on the Oregon Trail and other trails and roads, so long as they passed through and didn't stay. But unfortunately, that treaty was broken nearly immediately because from that time forward, the United States was failing at preventing immigration of miners and settlers specifically into Colorado territory. And they did nothing to enforce the treaty. As I guess, quote unquote, illegal aliens were streaming into Colorado onto Indian land. So here's a map. You could see Denver there on the far left. And these are all the different ways immigration was happening during that time. So what happened? Rumors about gold being up in the Rockies had been happening for quite some time. In the early 1800s, a guy named Zebulon Pike, of which Pike's Peak's named after, he was one of the first folks. People were all these rumors about gold and silver up in Colorado, and it was just increasing. More and more people were finding bits and pieces of gold in the mountains here and there as they passed through. Well, if you're finding gold and silver as you're passing along your trail, you might actually be tempted to stay a while. So, and a lot of people did. And I guess, but that didn't really create too much of an incursion until a couple of things happened. Because right at that time, Native Americans were still very prominent, and people were afraid of Native Americans being attacked by them. And then secondly, there was a massively unstable economy at the time in the United States. So two things did happen that unlocked Colorado for what became what we now know as modern history. The first thing was there were a lot of battles, and the natives were increasingly losing those. And so Americans were feeling more and more bold about making incursions. And then secondly, the economy on the East Coast or the eastern half of the United States was really so bad that people were like, you know what, I'll just move west and try my fortunes out there. So that's the backdrop of what was happening. And for that time, that's right around 1850 onward, you have Lakota, Arapaho, Cheyenne, Kiowa, other folks living out there, and they're trying to deal with this situation. And they spend a lot of their winters actually in the foothills of Colorado. And then in the summers, they go hunting buffalo out on the plains. And they kept running into more and more Anglo people on their lands and trying to figure out what to do about it. So let's look at a few characters here. We've got an Arapaho leader here on the left. That's Chief Left Hand. And on the right, you have Chief Black Kettle. They love their people. They love their land. They're trying very hard, trying to figure out what to do in this situation, because they knew that it was rapidly getting out of control, and they did not really know how to deal with it other than to try and make peace. So these guys are commonly referred to as the peace chiefs of the Cheyenne Arapaho during this time. And they're both great leaders, started as great warriors, but towards the ends of their lives, they're trying very much to have nation-to-nation talks with the United States, and more specifically, Colorado territorial government. So remember these two guys. Here's two other guys. They're Americans. The guy with the longer beard on the left is Mr. John Evans. He is an American politician, physician, founder of various hospitals and medical associations, railroad promoter, and the governor of the territory of Colorado during that time. Other claims to fame are Evanston, Illinois, named after him. Mount Evans here in Colorado, named after him. And he was not really a friend of the enemy, or a friend of the Indians, sorry. His attitude about the Native Americans of Colorado was he was concerned about defending Americans, especially in and around Denver. And his order was that the so-called friendly Indians should present themselves so that they go put out by a fort on a reservation so they could be safe. And that any of the Indians who didn't want to do that should just be pursued and destroyed. And then this other gentleman with the stern look, that's Mr. John Shivington. You might be interested to know that he was a Methodist pastor and a Mason. And he was also a colonel in the Army. And after he made his name for himself and a career for himself in the military during the Civil War, he came to Colorado, and he was basically Mr. Evans' right-hand man in what would become the Sand Creek Massacre. So Black Kettle, Left Hand, and a lot of their people were routinely going to Denver at this time, trying to have meetings with the likes of Evans and Chivington and all their people, and it was not going well. I guess, here's a quote by Chivington during that time. He said, "My rule of fighting white men or Indians is to fight until they lay down their arms and submit to military authority." He basically suggested to the natives at that time, go to the fort down there in southern Colorado and do as you're told. And so the Cheyenne Arapaho did that, but that didn't end well. They were all camped out near a place called Sand Creek, southeastern Colorado. They even had white flags they were given. Say, if you get in any trouble, just wave this white flag. The Americans won't mess with you. And they tried to do that. But on November 29th, 1864, a peaceful bands of Southern Cheyenne Arapaho people, they were all camped out by Sand Creek. And Colonel John Chivington and his men from the Colorado Volunteers showed up, and they massacred everyone they could find. February 8th, earlier that year, Black Kettle and Left Hand tried to secure peace and make their case. It didn't work. Later on that year in August, Evans met with Black Kettle, Left Hand, and others again, tried to make peace. They tried to move to the reservation. It didn't work. And largely the Indians that were there, they did not fight. It was routinely reported that they were waving the white flags they were given, because they were doing is what they thought would save their people. So nearly 300 men, women, and children were killed that day from Cheyenne Arapaho people. And the Colorado Volunteer Army, they returned, and anyone that was still alive, they would kill them, mutilate their bodies, and set fire to anything they could find. And these atrocities committed by the soldiers were actually initially praised in the American press, but later condemned because people started to realize what had happened and how it was done. Black Kettle did survive, as it is also reported Left Hand, but they were later, in less than 5 years, shot and killed at other places by American forces. So what happened after that? In the aftermath of that, Cheyenne Arapaho people no longer had much rights of any in the state of Colorado. And Colorado went on to become the Colorado that you all know today. And the Cheyenne Arapaho people, what was left of their people, some went north up into Wyoming, and the rest of them went to Oklahoma. And I won't read all these quotes, but I think I want to underscore this. A couple quotes from people, they interviewed people after the Sand Creek Massacre. So one man that was there, he said, "I saw the American flag waving and I heard Black Kettle yell to the other Indians to stand around that flag, and they raised a white flag. And they were in such a conspicuous position that they could not have been missed." Or I went over to the battleground the next day. I did not see a man or a body of a man, woman, or child but what was scalped. In many instances, their bodies were mutilated in the most horrific manner. It's United States history, Colorado history. So that's the first half of this. I hope I'm somehow on track. So what happened to Cheyenne Arapaho people? These are some fine folks that I had a great honor working with on this project. Cheyenne Arapaho people are not dead and gone. They're not lost in the books of history. They're alive and well. And many of them are in Oklahoma. They are working very hard every day to rebuild their language and their culture. And some of these folks here, Caitlin Pipes, him on the left, Chief Gordon Yellerman, traditional Cheyenne chief in the middle, and Winnie Whitetail, director of the George Hawkins Memorial Treatment Center on the right. They're the great people that I got to work with on this project. So I think it's important to understand Indigenous planning design, the mindset of Indigenous planning design. It's a continuum. You have to know where you come from. You have to understand where you're at if you're going to do anything to impact all your children and grandchildren. So that's what we're all about. Let's see if is it lagging? I think it might be lagging. Oh, wrong direction. Great. Here's everyone at the ribbon cutting, or sorry, the groundbreaking. This project was pretty exciting for the people of the tribe because nothing had happened for a while in terms of how they cared for the people, drug and alcohol treatment program. But 5 years ago, they chose to invest. So it was a very old building and they wanted to expand it. And we were the architects to do that. And you got to understand, 1864 is not that long ago. We still have people in the American South flying Confederate flags and talking about how great it was in the South in the 1860s. So if people can remember that and still think about whatever that paradigm is, just understand that for Cheyenne and Arapaho people, 1864 is not that long ago. And for people like Winnie Whitetail, she actually had great grandparents at that battle massacre site. It was very visceral for a lot of people. So carrying that forward, there's a lot of pain and hurt coming out of that. So the question is, how do we heal and overcome that? Very simple building, but they were very excited to move forward on the project. A lot of meetings, as you know. I can't underscore enough. I know we talk a lot about this in public interest design, but it's to put in practice. It's very important for us to humble ourselves as designers and architects and just sit side by side with these people. It was such a joy to listen to them talk to us about who they were, what they cared about. I want to reemphasize that every time I can. We had a little fun. We knew that some painter somewhere had to end up doing a paint by numbers experience with this, so we did that. I don't know how many people know the movie star Adam Beach, but we put Adam Beach in every single graphic representation as we developed this project, just to give it scale. But they loved Adam Beach being in every image. But working multiple iterations on this was super important. Gordon, there, right next to the medicine wheel window, he was very helpful in explaining to us what do all these colors even mean. So for Cheyenne and Arapaho people, they have a whole constellation universe of colors meaning something that then impacts ceremonial life. And in this instance, how do you heal from addiction? I just love the fact that it's not just a color, and what colors we pick and choose mean something to your average Cheyenne Arapaho person, or will mean something, because for a lot of people, they're so disconnected from their culture and their heritage, because you have to understand, after nearly 200 years of being told that your language, your way of thinking and doing and all of that's not good enough and you should give it up and just be an American. These people are still trying to hold on to that. So there's actually a lot of re-education that has to come along with projects like this. And this is my last slide, but as Gordon would tell you, he's just here to help move things forward and remember the ancestors that fought and survived and took the courage to move to a totally foreign place after nearly being wiped off the face of the earth. And then he would tell you that the green represents the prairies where they used to hunt and be happy. The brown zigzaggy shapes, that's all their lodges that they used to have. And the blue by the rivers that they once camped out at. And he would tell you that the red, it represents the blood of the people, and white is a purification, and that black is a darkness that you can overcome if you remember where you come from, remember your people. And yellow is representative of the sun and the light. It is a healing measure. And so if you're Cheyenne Arapaho and you've been drinking and drugging for most of your life and feel completely lost and don't feel very good about yourself, and maybe the first times you come to a meeting in this room, you remember who you're connected to. You remember all the ancestors who fought and died so that maybe you could be here today. And you remember there's great strength and power in the knowledge and colors and shapes that are all around you. And you can start to feel good about yourself again through that lens. Because oftentimes for our native people, the hardest thing is to get up every day and find a reason to live and feel proud. And it's projects like this and the involvement of community members in this way. It's the only way I know how to make that happen. And it was a great honor to be here. And I just wanted to say thank you out to the universe. I know there's lots of spirits of Cheyenne Arapaho people still here on this land today. And I wanted to say, you guys as kids, grandkids, and everybody else, they're doing all right and they're on the way back up. And we're doing it. So I just wanted to say thank you guys for listening. I was really nervous about this, 20 minutes. So I hope I did all right. And you guys have a good one. So thank you.